The first time I saw the water stop flowing, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The pipe that had fed my land for 40 years, my wife's ashes scattered right beside that spring, was bone dry. And there she was, standing in the mud like some self-appointed queen, the HOA president, Darla Crenshaw, smiling as her crew cut my water line. "This water doesn't belong to you anymore," she said. That was the moment she declared war on me, and she had no idea what kind of man she'd just crossed. Every morning, for 4 decades, I walked that same trail before sunrise, breathing in the smell of wet pine and earth. The spring sat in a hollow under a stand of oak trees my grandfather refused to cut. I'd built the water system myself back in '83, a simple gravity-fed line that filled a storage tank and kept the orchard alive. My wife, Martha, loved that place. Her ashes rest beneath the wildflowers that bloom along the bank. That spring wasn't just water, it was memory and peace and love buried deep in the soil. That morning I came back from my walk and saw a white notice taped to my gate, Oak Ridge Meadows Homeowners Association. Unauthorized water use. I'd never joined their little kingdom. My land was here long before their paved roads and shiny mailboxes. I tore the paper off, followed the muddy tracks up the hill, and there they were, a backhoe chewing into my land, 2 contractors cutting through my main line, and Darla holding her clipboard like it was a scepter. She turned to me with that fake, honeyed smile. "Morning," she chirped. "Just doing a little community improvement." "You're on my property," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And you've cut my line." She sighed, tapping her clipboard. "This is an HOA easement, Mr. Collier. Community water." I told her that spring had been in my family for 60 years. She shrugged like I was a child. The board voted to reroute it. "We're filling the new pond at the clubhouse." I could barely breathe. A decorative pond. She was draining my land, my wife's resting place, to fill a pond. "I'm telling you to stop," I said. Her smile vanished. Her eyes went cold. "This water doesn't belong to you anymore." Then she turned her back on me, told her men to finish the job, and walked away. I stood there watching the life of my land bleed out through that brass valve they'd installed. By sunset, the faucet in my kitchen sputtered dry. The orchard leaves curled, the flowers wilted, and the quiet around the spring turned heavy and hollow. I sat there until dark, staring at the fading water line, wondering how a group of strangers could just claim what had been mine all my life. The next day, I drove down to their office, a sterile box beside their brand-new pond. Darla sat behind a polished desk surrounded by fake plants. "Mr. Collier," she said sweetly, "I hope you're not here to cause trouble." I laid my deed and a county survey on her desk. "This is my land. That spring feeds my system. You had no right to touch it." She barely glanced at the papers. "Old maps don't mean much," she said. The HOA filed a land use amendment, perfectly legal. Then she slid an envelope toward me. An invoice. $9,400 for unmetered water usage. "Retroactive for 5 years, she said, pretending sympathy. "Or, we'll place a lien on your property." I stared at that number. I'd come with proof that they'd made a mistake that could affect the whole county, and she hit me with a bill. I folded my papers left without a word. For a few days, I just sat in my workshop surrounded by old blueprints and tools, feeling hollow. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was too old to fight this. But then I looked at a photo of Martha smiling by that spring, and I remembered the promise I'd made to keep the land the way she loved it. I opened the filing cabinets and pulled out the old county maps I'd drawn decades ago, the ones that still smelled of pencil dust and coffee. And there it was. The spring on my property wasn't just a spring, it was marked as a primary intake for the county's emergency water reserve. I'd helped design that system back in '87. My gravity line fed directly into a larger underground network that supplied 60% of the unincorporated county fire stations, rural clinics, everything. And Darla, in her ignorance, had just diverted it to fill her pond. That night, I called Sarah Jenkins, a hydrologist I used to work with. "Sarah," I said, "run a pressure test on the reserve lines. Coordinates coming your way." An hour later, she called back tense. "Nate, you're right. The system's losing pressure. Something's drawing water off grid." Now, I had proof, but I needed more. I needed eyes. I mounted a trail camera in the pines above the new valve and wired a small sensor to a blinking LED in my window. If that pipe flowed after dark, I'd know. 2 nights passed quietly. Then, at 2 in the morning, the red light blinked. I didn't move, just watched it flash in the darkness. At dawn, I pulled the camera card and loaded the footage. There he was, one of the contractors sneaking up the trail with a wrench uncovering a hidden valve buried under weeds. He opened it and diverted the flow into a larger underground pipe one that didn't lead to the pond. I followed the direction on the map. It went somewhere else entirely behind the clubhouse. They weren't just stealing from me, they were bleeding the county dry in secret. I called my old Army buddy Mike Dobbins, now an investigative journalist. "Mike," I said, "ever heard of an HOA hijacking a county water system?" He laughed. "You just made my week, Nate." He showed up the next day with gear that looked like it came from a spy movie: flow meters, cameras, data, transmitters. We installed them under the cover of night. Every drop they stole was logged and time-stamped. I finally had what I needed. But bureaucracy moves slow. Sarah told me her report would take 60 days to be reviewed. 60 days. By then, my orchard would be dust. Then came the call that changed everything. Sarah, again, her voice shaking. "Nate, the way they tapped that line, it's not just illegal, it's dangerous. If the main system loses pressure, that pond water, fertilizer, chemicals, everything will get sucked straight into the emergency reserve. You're looking at a contamination risk for the entire county." My blood ran cold. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about public safety. I dug through my old contracts until I found the one from 1987, the original agreement. I flipped to the clause I'd added all those years ago. If the spring's primary function is compromised, all subordinate land use claims are void, and full ownership reverts to the original custodian. That was me. I copied the contract, attached Sarah's data, and sent one package to the county and another to the local newspaper. 2 days later, the headline hit: "Local HOA diverts county emergency water reserve." Phones lit up. The county demanded a public meeting. The HOA tried to block it, but the pressure was too much. Darla had lost control of her empire. The meeting was standing room only. Farmers, firefighters, parents with kids on their hips. Darla sat at the front of the room, red-faced but still pretending to be in charge. I walked in with Sarah and Mike. My hands were steady. I unrolled a big schematic and taped it to the wall. "My name is Nate Collier," I said, my voice echoing. "And this woman has been lying to you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Darla shot to her feet. "This is a private meeting. You're out of order." Sarah's voice cut through her. "This is a public health emergency. Let him speak." I pointed to the map. "This blue line is your community's drinking water. This red one, your HOA pond. And this, I drew a circle, is where she connected them." Then I plugged in my laptop. The projector showed a live data feed of gallons per minute flowing into the illegal line. The number climbed fast. The crowd started murmuring. "This is fake," Darla shouted, her voice cracking. "It's doctored footage." I switched the feed. Now the projector showed the grainy black-and-white clip from my trail camera, the contractor sneaking through the dark opening, the hidden valve. The room went dead silent, then erupted. A man in the back yelled, "My son's been sick for a week. You poisoned us." Another shouted, "My livestock can't drink that sludge." The noise swelled, people shouting, demanding answers. The other board members slid their chairs away from Darla like she was contagious. I raised my hand, waited for quiet, then held up a folded document. "This is the 1987 county contract," I said. "It states that any tampering with this spring voids all other claims. Effective immediately. Your amendment, your fines, your pond, none of it stands. It all reverts to me." Darla's face drained of color. The county representative at the back stepped forward. Voice firm. "Effective immediately. Oak Ridge Meadows HOA is to cease all operations involving the spring. The county is assuming control pending a criminal investigation." The room exploded in cheers. Reporters swarmed the front, flashbulbs popping. Darla stumbled backward, shouting, "This is slander. This is a witch hunt." But nobody listened. One of her own board members, quiet little Lois, stood up. "Darla," she said, voice trembling, "you're not in charge anymore." That broke her. She tried to storm out, but cameras followed her every step. That night, the footage aired across the country. HOA, President Caught in Water Scandal. She became a meme, a punchline, but her real nightmare was still ahead. A few days later, she snuck into the HOA office after hours trying to delete financial records and meeting minutes. What she didn't know was that the county had already frozen their servers. The sheriff's deputies caught her red-handed USB drive in hand. Tampering with evidence fraud obstruction, she was finished. Her empire crumbled overnight. The rest of the board resigned, the HOA stripped of its powers, and the county restored the spring to protected status. That night, I walked the trail back up to the ridge. The air smelled like pine again. The spring was running clear, whispering softly over the rocks. I knelt beside it and let the cold water run through my fingers. For the first time in weeks, I felt Martha close again, like the land was breathing. Funny thing about people like Darla, they think power means control. But power's just borrowed. The earth always takes it back. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. It just needs someone who remembers where the water comes from.